Hey friends, if you're tuning in for all my Juneteenth content, I want to say thank you very much. Today my plan is to put out a lot of videos on black culture and how it relates to nerd culture. And what I want to talk about right now is chitlins and Frybread. And when people think of those, they think of very specific ethnocentric delicacies. But what they don't realize is that these are not things that were brought from our respective, histories. Chitlins are pig intestines, and in the black community, they're considered by a lot to be delicacies, and they're tasty as all hell. And fry bread is a Native American tradition, what is considered traditional food. And I thought coming up, my dad was married to a Native American lady. I thought it was something that was, just part of the tradition because it was so celebrated and beloved. And as I grew older and learned about history and culture, I learned that both of these things had very similar histories. Um, soul food in general, but especially chitlins, these were parts of the animals that were refuse that were given to black slaves to sustain ourselves. And what we did with that tool of oppression was season it up and develop methods of cooking it to take it from something horrible to something that tastes damn good. But it is very unhealthy. And fry bread, um, that came out of the U.S. government wanting to rein in the Native Americans and grab as much land as possible. So they virtually wiped out the buffalo, the main source of sustenance of Native Americans. And what they did in that stead was give them a whole bunch of ingredients that they weren't familiar with and weren't used to cooking with. Processed flour, grease, stuff that was foreign to them. But they took what was meant for oppression and made it into a delicacy that, while very, very tasty, is very, very unhealthy. And how does that tie into nerd culture? Well, I got to thinking about black exploitation, and a lot of people they see Shaft as low budget, and things of that ilk, Dolomite movies like that, and they see it as the reflection of black culture in the '70s. But really, when you look at black people that were making movies, such as Melvin Van Peebles, they were not permitted to be directors of major movies. To get into the studios a lot of times to record, they would have to lie about their intention. And Melvin Van Peebles was very famous for, pretending that some of his movies were in fact pornography. And so there were very graphic scenes in there that, people, the higher ups would be, okay, these guys are just making pornography. And what they were doing is they were making, low budget films that reflected a part of the society. And then we learned how to make it entertaining. And when Hollywood was like, whoa, these things are making money, with very low budgets, they found a formula. And while it's entertaining, it's not something that you want to live on. And it's happened time and time again in culture and in entertainment. I think of, when I was coming up in the 90s, you had the hood movies. We started out with movies like Boys in the Hood that was, very strong in social commentary. And it had a message beyond the violence, and a lot of the violence wasn't even shown. It was insinuated, talked about, but outside of a few scenes, violence wasn't exploited in Boys in the Hood. Um, And the few moments that it were are parts of the movie that really stick with you because it was there for a reason. It was there to drive home the gravity of a point. But what Hollywood saw was, okay, well, this black filmmaker made this movie about, gang life and violence, forgetting the social commentary. And we had a whole run of films that, glorified the gangster lifestyle. And while they were entertaining, they were not something that you want to live on and were not healthy and perpetuated a lot of false narratives that are still believed to this day. And it wasn't because that was the only thing that black filmmakers could do. It was the only thing that Hollywood would buy from black filmmakers. And, every time though we get put, into these corners, we make beautiful art, iconic art out of those. I think really some of the unsung heroes of black cinema recently are the Wayans families. Damon Wayans, Marlon Wayans, Sean Wayans, Keaton Ivory Wayans, the one who set up the whole thing and started making In Living Color and movies like I'm Gonna Get You Sucker. And a lot of their movies, they took elements of black exploitation and even hood movies, and they mocked them and they made them into parodies, and turned something that was meant to oppress into something that brought joy. And it's beautiful how the human spirit cannot be uh, tied down permanently. Um, that's the beautiful thing about culture and about learning about culture and the resilience of mankind and the refusal to die. And we got beautiful art like Dynamite Comics. I got into a few of their books. This is Shaft, Imitation of Life. And what they did is they took, you know, something that became iconic, Shaft, and they turned it into beautiful works. This is Imitation of Life, which is a great story with brilliant art. And we do have the archetypes, set pieces, violence, but it's not exploitative. It is, it's celebratory of that style that was created out of necessity. And it's really a love letter to, the films and to Richard Roundtree's Shaft. And it has a social commentary, especially this, Imitation of Life, that is more relevant today than ever. And so, when you hear these things and you hear about something from an early culture that might give you pause, like, oh, chitlins, or why would I want to fatten and Frybread? What's that about? Or haggis, or other cultural dishes. You know, dig a little deeper, find out where that comes from, and really discover. I think um, the circumstances that shaped it. Is it a true reflection of what's going on in the culture? And is it healthy? Is it good? And it's the reason why I'm putting out these videos is I believe that knowledge and understanding are the most powerful weapons against hate and bigotry. And so I'm wanting to share my experiences with nerd culture as a black man who grew up in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and the effect that black cinema, black art, comic books, action figures, movies, and the effects that it had on me, and how it shaped the person I am, and how these things, a lot of times, are reflections of a small part of, a culture that is much deeper than black exploitation, than hood movies, than a lot of things, than chitlins. and Frybread. So anyway, if you want to celebrate Juneteenth, it's not just about the black culture. If you really want to celebrate the spirit of Juneteenth, ask your neighbor about themselves. Find out about something from another culture, or a person that grew up in a different environment. Get to know them and find out what shaped who they are right now. And that is the spirit of Juneteenth. And there's a lot of people of a certain political persuasion that will try to convince you it's about replacing a culture or about denigrating a culture. Not at all. I've been participating in Juneteenth celebrations for 45 years of my life, and it has always been a culturally diverse and vibrant celebration that's about unity and celebrating the freedom of not just some men, but every American. And it's a process that's still ongoing. America got its initial freedom July 4th. Black Americans got our initial freedom on Juneteenth. Um, and there was still another 100 years of struggling to be seen as fully fledged Americans and people. And even through the 80s, the times that I came in, there were still culturally normative tropes and things that held me back, in the 80s. The fact that when I played football, I couldn't be considered for a quarterback because black men weren't smart enough to play quarterback. Even as an adult, I was turned away from jobs that I was qualified for because they weren't sure how white customers would feel about a black employee. And so freedom is an ongoing process, and knowledge is the vehicle that drives freedom. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for more lighthearted fare and fun today as I take this time on my channel to celebrate Juneteenth. And thank you for watching. And by the way, if you're wanting some fun action that really captures that blaxploitation feel from the 70s, Dynamite Comics, Shaft, they have at least I think 3 or 4 compendiums of different arcs. I've read 2, and they're both very enjoyable, fun, action-packed fairs. So anyway, I will see you guys next time, and till then, keep reading them books. I am out.